Hello there, you're watching the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half an hour, we're going to be seeing what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Rachel Shabi and the critic and columnist Kate Maltby. So hello to both of you. So let's take a look then at what's on the front pages. And the Sunday Times says that Theresa May infuriated Buckingham Palace after the general election by claiming she'd reached a deal with the DUP, but then took another 17 days to finalise the agreement. The Mail on Sunday reports that the Prime Minister will announce a review of the tuition fee system as part of an attempt to stave off a leadership challenge. The Sunday Telegraph says she's hoping to win over students and younger voters with the overhaul. But the Observer suggests that support for Mrs May is draining. That's more like it, Mrs May, the Sunday Express says, welcoming the new policy pledges ahead of the Conservative conference. So an awful lot about the Conservative Party conference there. Lots to talk about, though, with Rachel Shabi and the art critic and columnist Kate Maltby. So lots of different areas of this story to cover as the papers show. Well, where to start, indeed? You've chosen the Sunday Times to kick off with. And in fact, they're looking back a bit. They're looking back to the election. And this is another chapter from Tim Shipman, their political editor, who's been bringing out revelations each week. This is when he's talking about Theresa May visiting the Queen just after the general election. So what's he saying here?
Well, he's saying, this is from his new book, Fallout, A Year of Political Mayhem, which is serialised, as you say, in the Sunday Times. And he's saying that the palace was not pleased by the way Theresa May dealt with them, basically, liaised with them over announcing that she was going to form a party, form a government, rather. She did that before she had secured a deal with the DUP, 17 days before, and officials at the palace thought that she lacked courtesy.
Well, the Queen was annoyed that she couldn't get to Ascot for the whole time, could she?
Yeah.
They were moving around the Queen's
speech. Because the deal took longer to put together.
The deal with the DUP took longer than the Queen had been promised.
Well, I think it wasn't just that she couldn't get to Ascot, but it was just a disruption of, you know, the royal schedule and protocol and all kinds of things that they weren't pleased with. But also, you know, all kinds of details coming out of here where at one point it was suggested to Theresa May's new Chief of Staff, Gavin Barwell, that they could send over a former SAS advisor to brief Theresa May, to give her a sort of pep talk on resilience. That was the extent to which they were worried about her.
I mean, it makes you feel pity, doesn't it? And no leader wants to be pitied. I mean, I would say the Queen, the palace may have been annoyed by the way Theresa May behaved back in June, but they will be even more annoyed that this has all come out in a book. I mean, there's nothing that the palace likes less than their relationship with government to be discussed, or even the Queen's personal political leanings to be talked about. I think there's a general spread across the papers again of people constructing Theresa May as this broken figure, as this slightly tragic figure, and that in itself is pitiable, but actually the fact that we're being made to pity her is a deliberate strategy clearly by people who are trying to. When cabinet ministers whisper to journalists that the Prime Minister, particularly when the Prime Minister is a woman, is too emotional to cope with the job and somehow sort of exhausted and hopeless. There's a very deliberate political undermining going on, isn't there?
I'm sure there is, but actually that's not. I have no doubt that that's the case, but that's actually not my takeaway from this. What I take away from this is actually the extent to which this jeopardised national interest. And this is the thing that we're sort of papering over all the time, that actually we have a really precarious, hastily cobbled together coalition, you know, that really flew against sort of the norms of our democracy in a very fundamental way, and is still very precarious. It's battling it out between itself. There's constant infighting, squabbling, and that's not healthy for us as a country.
Although
I'm less interested
in Europe.
Yes, but it's still not healthy for Britain by any measure. It's just not.
It's closer to normality than the coalition government was between 2010 and 2015. I mean, we are in an exceptional time. Most of the countries in the developed world are going through extraordinary ruptions in their politics, and we are no different. So obviously, forms of government that haven't been tried before are being tried.
But, and I was just going to pick up on the fact that she is there being portrayed as broken in the headline. The picture of her is her looking uncertain. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the article saying Boris Johnson believes she will be gone in a year. I think this is coming out in a documentary. It also, to move on to one of the other papers, chimes with the Observer, which suggests that Sajid Javid has also refused to confirm that he thinks she'll still be in the job in a year as well. So more further undermining for her, it would seem.
I think not refused to confirm that if she'll be in the job in a year, but if she should lead the Tories into the next election campaign, which takes us to the Telegraph, where the Prime Minister is understood to give an interview, again assuring journalists that she will fight the next election campaign, which may be as far away as 2022. No one in Westminster thinks she'll still be Prime Minister in 2022. This is the issue here. I mean, everything we're reading today, and of course it's the night before Tory conference, of course that's relevant, is about other leadership contenders setting the stage for their own campaigns. And, the ground under Theresa May is very, very shifty indeed.
And, of course, a lot of focus on Boris Johnson because he's did that interview in today's papers, setting out his 4 red lines on Brexit and also giving advice on public sector pay and all sorts as well.
Yeah,
putting her under pressure on the eve of the conference. So do you think that her hand will be forced? Do you think that there is likely to be a leadership election sooner rather than later?
She is going to have to do something to deal with Boris Johnson because it's by any measure, it's completely unacceptable for him to be dictating red lines to the Prime Minister over negotiations with Brexit. I mean, first of all,
so in public.
First of all, there's the lack of unity that shows when, clearly what the party needs more than anything is to present a united front. But secondly, even in terms of negotiation, now he's revealed that the British side is completely divided, which is a hopeless thing. You want to go into negotiations with this really solid, united front, don't you? So he's jeopardised that as well. And I just think that she really needs to take charge.
Yes, I agree. The Brexit camp, the hard Brexit camp, talk a lot about being patriotic and the need for us all, even journalists, to be more patriotic. There's nothing patriotic about airing the fight over your poker hand in front of the opposition, is there?
So should he be sacked?
He wants to be.
Well, apparently,
so he can be a Brexit martyr, as some people say. Is that why?
Yes. If anything, maybe she's right not to sack him because that really would give him what he wants. What I would say is that the shine has come off Boris Johnson. He may still have some support within the Tory party, but I think he's a much less popular figure in the country at large than he was, say, 2 years ago. There was a lot of discussion during the Brexit campaign about his motivations, how long he'd really been a committed Eurosceptic. That story about whether he wrote 2 versions of his article for the Telegraph, one declaring he'd back the Remain campaign and one declaring he'd back the Leave campaign. And I think even those, the members of the public who voted Brexit, there are a lot of those people support a transition deal. Some don't. But for Boris Johnson to die in a ditch over a hard Brexit and a short transition period means that he's cut down his base from that 52% to a small fraction of that 52%.
OK, so and let's just have a look at how the front pages are tackling Theresa May's fight back, if you like. This is the agenda she wants to be talking about. And she's done an interview with the Sunday Telegraph. She's also done an interview with the Sun on Sunday. We don't have that one in yet. And her pitch is to younger voters, isn't it?
Yes, she is going for young people because actually Philip Lee, who's the minister in the Ministry of Justice, he told the Observer in an interview that the Tories are a huge turn-off, quote, for under 45s. There are twice as many voters under 45 who think Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is on their side. And that obviously is a huge problem for the Conservatives, which they're trying to redress with these pledges that she's scheduled to promise in conference, including freezing tuition fees, setting up raising the threshold at which you start paying off your fees from $21,000 to $25,000, and looking into a review over debt, which is spiralling and a huge problem. But I can't help feeling that this is a little bit too little, too late. It's tinkering away at the edges of something that is so profound and so systemic. And, when you have the Labour Party saying yes, we do need a system change, we need a system redress, this isn't working, it's not working for young people. And then you have the Conservatives just saying, yeah, well, we'll just tinker with it a little bit. I don't see how that's going to work as an offer.
And raising the threshold, certainly for students, they gain £360 a year, it says here. And I think there's also help for first-time buyers as well. Just to remind you, the Mail on Sunday's take, PM gambles on tuition fee U-turn to head off Tory coup. The Sunday Express thinks it's a good idea. That's more like it, Mrs May, they say. Do you think this will make a difference, Kate, given the fact that, you know, the Labour Party is talking about getting rid of tuition fees, just keeping them static? Is that really going to make a difference, do you think?
Well, I agree with Rachel that this is too little, too late. This is tinkering around the edges. I also think that what turns young people off the Conservatives is cultural issues, like a huge difference in the way that we look at the world and the way we approach the world and the way it seems that a cabinet of, frankly, an older generation of Tories who've been brought back after the Cameron years look at the world. There's actually also been some research this weekend coming out showing, no surprise to anyone, that young people care far more about climate change than the older generation. The Conservatives need to look at that, I would say. And I think there is a general sense, yes, the retail offers, the tuition fees, the economic issues come into this, that the contract between the generations is broken. Climate change is a great example of that the older generation have used up the resources of the Treasury, they've used up the resources of the planet. And the Conservative Party is going to need to create, really reach out and establish a new covenant, a new offer.
Does that mean then that the next leader needs to be someone from the younger generation? There had been talk that might be the way that the party should go.
But there's a lot of talk in the Conservative Party about that. I'm not sure how many candidates they have, and I don't think it's as superficial as that. We'll see.
But I just think it's, I've heard that talk as well, that they're looking for, they're looking at the grassroots for the next leader. They're interviewing people. But it is, I just feel like the Conservatives are just not of this time. There's been so much of a change. We've seen all the polls about where the majority public opinion is over things like renationalisation, investment in infrastructure, higher levels of tax. These kind of things are just not in Conservative DNA, and yet they are very much the public mood at the moment.
OK, or certainly that's how Jeremy Corbyn would see it, certainly, wouldn't he?
Well, he's not the only one.
OK, let's take a break. We've got lots more to talk about after the break, including why the Queen's estate said no to Star Wars location scouts hoping to film near Windsor Castle. That's coming up soon. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me tonight, the journalist and author Rachel Shabi and the critic and columnist Kate Maltby. And we're going to turn our attention back to the front page of The Observer. And it's actually the picture story that you want to talk about next. And this is the referendum that Catalonia is planning tomorrow, but which the Spanish government is saying won't happen and shouldn't happen.
Yes, there's clearly been a colossal breakdown in negotiations and in the relationship between the Catalonian government and the Spanish government here. Effectively, the equivalent of the SNP, I suppose, for British viewers, that a nationalist regional Catalan government has been calling for a referendum for some time. The Spanish government hasn't been giving it to them, so they've just decided to run anyway. And of course, it's leading to real confrontation on the streets.
It is, and also that the government is saying that it's going to make sure that the polling stations that are earmarked for this referendum will be closed, and at the same time you've got people, some of them are schools, and you've got people sitting in those schools trying to keep them open to make sure that voters will be able to go to the polls. So tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day just to see what happens.
It's a really extraordinary situation. The crackdown from the Spanish government has just been quite remarkable. There's not just closing down polling stations. It's the crackdown that we've seen in the weeks leading up to this, arresting Catalonian MPs or arresting people who have referendum material on them, media stations that they see as being associated with this in some way. And this is, of course, For Catalonians, they would say that this situation has been coming for some years, that, you know, back in 2010, the situation was very much reversed. Up until then, they were given more autonomy and control, not over just the culture, but also over political and economic life. And that was rolled back in 2010, which, of course, has slowly, inexorably led to this situation. It really is an awful standoff, and you can't imagine it going well tomorrow.
No, that's right, and the government saying it's going against the constitution. They're saying it's effectively illegal. And so what happens if, you know, the people that do get to vote for independence, but the turnout is terribly low?
I don't think anyone can say that this referendum is going to sort of meet necessary standards.
No, it's not going to be free and fair, is it?
It's not going to be free and fair. But I think the pressure will continue for a real referendum. The Catalan people have shown their determination to hold one. I would say there is an argument for saying that it is not in the best interests of democracy to impose a referendum on one part of the country when you haven't engaged the rest of the country in a proper dialogue. I mean, I don't think that Westminster would react well if the Welsh regional government just announced that an independence referendum was happening. I think we can understand why this is such a divisive issue. But to me, this is all part of the sort of growing instability of the world again after a period of relative peace. And that seems to be a pattern, whatever the situation, that's being repeated in a lot of places we know. I mean, if you think about the Basque Country, which is a segment within Catalonia, a separate segment, and the spate of terrorist bombings by the ETA years ago, very much in the 90s, which seemed to calm down. There was a peace deal done, just as in Northern Ireland. There was an agreement, everything began to just get a bit calmer, and now we're back to sort of major nationalist fights and regional fights. And
indeed.
Sorry, I'm depressive tonight.
Well, I don't think we're going to cheer people up enormously with the next story. After, obviously, Ryanair being in the news all week, Monarch Airlines making the front pages of it's on the Sunday Times as well as the Sunday Telegraph here, as they put it, passengers' plans up in the air because of the future of Monarch Airlines in some question.
Yeah, and as you say, this is so soon after the situation with Ryanair, where, you know, they basically cancelled Christmas for a lot of people who'd made plans to travel at that time, and those plans then seemingly cancelled by Ryanair. And now we have Monarch Airlines with, again, 100,000 holidaymakers who could be stranded overseas. So they have 24 hours. They've been given 24 hours to come up with something, a rescue plan for this situation. And it is, you do have to feel for people who obviously, you know, work hard, save for a holiday, and then it just sort of collapses in front of your eyes. It's just complete disregard for their passengers, for their customers.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that one. In the meantime, we've just got time to take a look at page 3 of the Mail on Sunday, and it's actually this story here down the bottom. How Queen told Darth Vader, "Get off my land." Talk us through this one.
Oh, well, this is, sorry, I thought that was one for you, Kate. This is a story.
No, sorry, I just thought that you really wanted to talk about this.
Well, I tell you what, it's very well written. According to the Star Wars producers may be able to count senior royals among their biggest fans, but when they tried to film on the Queen's land, they found out the hard way that the Force was not with them. So apparently both Princes William and Princes William and Harry are big fans and were on set for the filming of the last Star Wars film, Rogue One. But alas, this did not, you know, they didn't give the producers any influence when it came for asking for permission to film scenes at Windsor Park.
But
they were
refused. Sounds like Theresa May is in good company then with people who annoyed the Queen recently.
So the pay-per-view goes full circle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And we must leave it there, I'm afraid. But Kate and Rachel, great stuff. We will see you again at 11:30. Thank you.
Thanks.